I'm Councillor Mumtaz Khan. So Ray, I was born in Bangladesh, and I came to the United Kingdom in mid-70s, and I'm one of 6 siblings. My father arrived here in the UK in the early 60s, I believe, around sort of. And me and my mum, my siblings, we joined a lot later. I remember it was during the summertime. There was a huge struggle for my father to get us into the education system. There was a long waiting list for local schools to offer us a place. I also came at a time, Ray, when East London was not the same East London that we're able to kind of walk around quite safely these days. I think around kind of 1978, that's when the incident with Altaf Ali happened, when he was brutally attacked and murdered just round the corner from where we lived, literally 2 minutes away from the block that we used to live in. And I remember, Dad kind of giving us quite clear instruction: you don't draw the curtains. And the block that we lived in, there was the old National Front hub. There used to be a shop where they played loud music, and each time we came out of our block, we would literally just run and then run back, because the fear of them setting the dog on us. My mum was just terrified each time, she dropped us to school, picked us up. We were told, when we were in Bangladesh, we were told, you're going to London, it's the land of beautiful things. I certainly did not experience beautiful things when I arrived here, because we were literally just, cramped in a small accommodation, not being allowed to kind of play out, simply fear of being racially attacked. We used to get fireworks thrown at us, and I know each time my dad went to the mosque, they used to grab it, take his hat away. I remember, my brother, he used to face constant harassment because he was a little bit older than us. He was in his kind of teenage, and they used to start on him, quite frequently. I think the boys had it quite hard in the early days, because they used to want to go out more than I did, and the physical attacks. We know friends, distant relatives who were physically attacked, and that brought fear, that brought a whole load of anxiety in us. We never felt freedom. So like I said earlier on, that London wasn't at all the picture that was painted to us when we were young and back in Bangladesh, to become a nursery nurse. But as soon as I qualified, I got into community work instead. And I remember a project called the Jagannaри Centre, where I worked there as a outreach worker, going out to kind of encourage women and girls to come and take up training I remember, I quickly got involved in setting up a Asian counselling project. But whilst I was doing that, I was also kind of looking for a full-time position, and that full-time position was Weavers Youth Forum. And my first job was the Women's Development Officer. And I remember having been offered that job. I think the salary was about £12,000 at the time. And I thought, wow, £12,000, it's a lot of money. I went home and I said, Dad, this is the job I got. And at the time, the nursery nurse positions were being advertised for like 6,000 something. So I think money also kind of drive me toward taking up that position, and naturally, as I said, I enjoy caring for other people. Weavers Youth Forum used to be based in Shoreditch, and it wasn't exactly the safest area to work in. I remember, my dad clearly saying, are you going to be able to kind of walk around some of the areas they're going to expect you to work? And I said, I guess I didn't really understand the risk. I in the back of my head, I wanted to help people. I wanted women to come out and, take advantage of the resources that we have available. But it was also difficult to encourage my own community. I remember it was quite difficult to encourage our brothers to let their sisters, their wife, to come out and take up English classes. I remember setting up other activities such as learning to sew. I worked for the youth offending team because quite quickly what we saw around the late 80s and the early 90s was the young Bangladeshi boys entering the criminal justice system. And the unjust of the system, I remember how quickly Bangladeshi boys were entering the prison system for petty crimes. And you knew immediately that the system was not treating our boys fairly. One of the things Tower Hamlet offered us was getting qualified, getting the funds to get qualified in the job. So whilst I started as a unqualified social worker, they sent me away to get qualified, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that because there was a huge need for Bengali social workers to work with Bengali families, children who were entering the social care system. And using interpreters, and I know we use interpreters now because we have to, but we were not delivering or achieving what we really needed to and meeting the needs of the local Bangladeshi community. So I think that opened the door for people like me to enter the world of social work, and it's the best thing I did. And I've always been doing safeguarding, child protection work, and I've seen the kind of changes, and I do take some of the credit along with some of my sisters, some of my brothers who started working in the field. Because what we also started seeing was the entry of a lot of Bangladeshi children into the care system. And that's simply because the existing system at the time didn't quite understand our family values, our ways of doing things. And we as Bangladeshis also didn't quite understand that, you know, smacking a child could result us entering the children's social care system. And, you know, we needed to kind of educate ourselves that that's not the best way to discipline children. Physical chastisement is not, you know, the way to teach children the best ways in life. That became another kind of campaign for us, you know, individually talking to parents, talking to the education system, to get this, you know, the basics right, that, you know, we are good parents, but we also need to kind of understand those basic ethics here that, you know, we simply can't get away. And you know, I learned over the years that physical chastisement is not the best discipline. The referrals that come in to children's social care, I would say a high percentage is to do with domestic abuse, and often it's women and children being kind of impacted by domestic abuse. We also see quite a high range of referrals for young people who are getting involved or being kind of pulled into gangs, dealing drugs, and substance misuse is another huge problem that we see when referrals come in, and in some ways they're all kind of linked. So a family scenario where there is domestic violence, domestic abuse, the children are being exposed to, and what we're then seeing is some of those children are finding more comfort outside in a kind of false built family. And when I say family, you know, other much more sophisticated group of people who are recruiting young people to go out and work for them. You know, they would often become the soldiers who are delivering drugs, the soldiers who are getting involved in doing the work of the bigger gang groups. And I think that in Tower Hamlets, you know, in the early 90s, we saw that became a huge problem. You know, we saw quite a few loss of young people's lives, where you know, young Bangladeshi boys were introduced to drugs. Young Bangladeshi boys were involved in you know, getting involved in the wrong side of the law, where they were also drug dealing. For several years, we've been talking about it as a community, that, you know, how do we help our young people? How do we help our parents? So it's people like yourself, people like me, you know, we have a huge responsibility. We need to, you know, talk about these issues. We should not hide away from issues that's affecting our society, affecting our own community, affecting our neighbours. So you know, we need to be working with the education system and saying, you know, they need to understand about our culture. They need to understand how the root of the problem, it didn't just that, you know, like I said earlier on, some of our young people were getting into the wrong side of the law because of what they've experienced in life, because of what they saw their parents go through. And it's now, I guess you know, it's been happening for some time now, and the political system needs to understand that. And you know, as I also kind of introduced myself as a councillor, I have a huge responsibility each time. You know, I'm having a walkabout in my own ward. You know, my residents talk about antisocial behaviour. My residents talk about some of the inequality. You know, we are in a position where we need to raise these issues where it matters. We also need to have representation in decision making, because only we can bring those changes. We need to be able to have a say in how policies are being made. And if you look at, you know, how COVID has affected our community at large, once again, it's our community people who are doing the frontline work. And regardless of the risk, we've had no choice. We've had to go out to work. You know, and if you look at, you know, who has been most affected, the affected, we've not been protected. So I say we haven't got enough people in decision-making places. Even the brilliant NHS that we talk about, you know, I am proud of the NHS that, you know, I want to see, you know, the NHS you know, continuing to do the good work that it does. However, you know, it's not my people who are up in the system making decisions. How do we get there? And what are the barriers? What are those glass ceilings? And I don't want to be stopped by the glass ceilings no more. You know, I want to exceed. I have ambition. I want to take my sisters along, because I feel that, again, that's another area where we need to be working on, is promoting our Black sisters, our Bangladeshi sisters, to be in those decision-making positions. I think not only we experience, you know, double, triple prejudice when it, you know, when it comes to issues of equality, you know, and we've got to encourage our sisters who are not coming forward, and we have to support the sisters who are coming forward, because these days I don't see I do see that there are sisters who are interested in getting involved in leadership. Newham, it's a special borough because it's a very diverse, unique borough. It's rich in culture. You know, in every street of Newham, you know, I bump into people that I know, and that's a great feeling. You know, it's a feeling of kind of belonging. However, Newham also has its, you know, huge. It's a borough. It's a very you know, deprived borough, and as you know, Newham was very affected by COVID, and we lost many lives. I know someone who knows someone where they've lost a family member, and again, poverty, deprivation has a huge contribution to COVID, and how if you look at the many lives that we've lost are those from the deprived family, those who have, you know, one family member who's doing frontline work. I've been doing most of my work from home, so the introduction of our new way of working, you know, I do a lot of my work on Zoom, Teams, and I guess in some ways, people that I couldn't easily kind of have access to, I can now. So that's, in some ways, that's kind of been a bit of a good thing for me, is an advantage. You know, I can have a Zoom call with somebody from, you know, the States or Bangladesh, or, you know, different parts of the country, and it's bringing people together through the modern technology. However, you know, during this year, Ray, I lost two members of my family. I lost my dad, I lost my mother-in-law, both very instrumental people in my life. You know, my father introduced me to politics. And I think one of the questions you were asking me even earlier on is what brought you to the work that you do now. I think it's a lot to do with, you know, the stories my father told me, the connection between the kind of what the suffering and how I can change lives and, you know, improve, you know, in small ways by getting involved in kind of policy making. I guess during the COVID restriction, I couldn't go and see my family. I wanted to make sure that they were safe. I did doorstep visits. Even, you know, during the time my dad, my mother-in-law passed away, it was difficult. Family members were not able to sit with them, you know, recite the Quran, say their last goodbyes. Funerals were done in it's just been a very strange time. You know, there's been restrictions in terms of how many members were able to kind of attend, and thinking ahead, planning ahead, you know, things that we just naturally took advantage. You know, now I have to kind of ask people before I visit if everyone's well, and also the impact it's had in my job. You know, we started off only working through video calls, unable to kind of visit the vulnerable families. So say, for example, a family we're working with where we have concerns about safeguarding, we would normally make sure we visit the home, we check the home environment, we speak to the children individually. All of this was kind of impacted because it was done via video calls. And you know, as you know, it's not always the best way to kind of engage people. You know, some people are, you know, video shy. Some children may not want to kind of interact with me to tell me their wishes and feelings via a video link. It's hard enough to kind of engage them even face to face. If you don't have enough money in your pocket, the choice is limited when you're doing your grocery, when you have to go out and, you know, buy your household necessity, you know, um, school uniforms and basic, you know, children's needs were kind of done via online. I remember when, you know, I took my mum to have her vaccine. I physically didn't, actually, my sister-in-law did, but, you know, there was a lot of talking and why we needed to get the vaccine done. You know, I remember talking to residents in Newham, and when I had it done, I then published that on social media. When my mum had it, you know, it was a way to kind of encourage families to think about why we needed to get vaccines and how important it was. Um, I think again, you know, we've got the boosters available, and I'm, you know, always kind of encourage our residents, our community. I'm a people's person. I like to meet people. You know, I like hugging. You know, I grew up in a family where, you know, you greet people by hugging, and what tends to kind of immediately hit me is I may be ready to hug someone, but, you know, they're not. And I stop, and I have to do it because it's the right thing to do. You know, wearing a mask, you know, initially I used to feel, oh my God, I'm going to suffocate. You know, I'm always kind of on the edge when it comes to I think it's also because what I've experienced this year. I keep my phone on all the time. The I think it's just anxiety. It's anxiety. I check my phone more often than I ever did. I worry about my family members. I'm more conscious about my neighbors. Like I like to check how my neighbors are doing, and I don't know if I did that before. I'm more conscious about phoning people, finding out if they're okay. I think I feel I'm more kind of conscious about issues, um, and you know, I don't know if I did call so many people before. I'm not having long conversations, but I'm trying to check on people, like if they're okay. Um, and I guess that's a good thing. We need to make sure, you know, our elderly relatives and, you know, our neighbours are okay, safe. And I think COVID certainly kind of did it for us, kind of taught us that, you know, we need to kind of make sure we're checking on each other. And, you know, mental health is another huge area, Ray. During this pandemic, um, you know, a lot of vulnerable young people, a lot of vulnerable elderly people, and also women who are victims of domestic abuse. They're trapped. They've got nowhere to go. They cannot move away from perpetrators. They're stuck at home, and that worries me. You know, how we the importance of making sure that we check on our vulnerable relatives, friends, neighbours. I think these were always issues in our community, but it's been kind of highlighted more to us through this horrible pandemic.